Hi there, I'm Emma and this is my spoiler-free review of The Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. So this book follows our main protagonist Elizabeth, who has grown up in a magical library, occupied by not so much books as we know them, but by things called grimoires, which are basically magical books created by sorcerers. So Elizabeth is training, she has a dream of becoming what's called a warder. And warders basically protect the rest of the world against these grimoires, some of which are extremely dangerous. And if provoked, can turn into like horrible monsters capable of wiping out entire towns. And it's Elizabeth's dream to become one of these warders. She's basically been raised by one in particular, and she's grown up around them and around the grimoires, and she loves the world that she lives in. I mean, you would too if you grew up in like a magical library where the books can talk to you and you can have relationships with them, and basically, yeah, you would too. But at the start of this book, an extremely dangerous grimoire is being moved to Elizabeth's library, and basically in short order events kick off. Elizabeth is forced into a life-death situation, and in time she meets and ends up teaming up with this sorcerer called Nathaniel. And Nathaniel has quite a troubled past. They don't necessarily get along, and it's a really interesting dynamic. So the overarching plot is kind of there's a threat to all of the libraries, and her and Nicholas are trying to figure it out. The second thing I want to talk about is the writing, because in my opinion that is the linchpin of this book. Margaret Rogerson just has this extremely unique style of writing that's like a blend between kind of more traditional straightforward writers and Laini Taylor. I mean, I'm talking Strange the Dreamer, Laini Taylor, which is just like so luscious. So this kind of has that, but it's also restrained enough that you don't feel like you're being dragged around by the language, as enjoyable as it might be in Strange the Dreamer. But in this book, the language just is so full of joy and so full of zeal for this kind of concept that I think we can all agree is so captivating for people who like books. You know, the magical library, and most of the book takes place in or around libraries, and it kind of has that vibe of being very worshipful of books and what they mean to people, and like giving books voices is, you know, a great way of talking about that relationship that people have with books. So I really appreciate how the writing accentuates what's going on in this story, and it's just beautiful. I mean, I would love to pick out a bunch of lines, but I'll let you do that. Go ahead and read it yourself. The writing is stellar. It's a joy to read. It flows perfectly. It never feels bogged down with too much detail, but at the same time you feel as though you've really got a foot in the door of this world. It's not glossed over. She kind of lingers around things that you want her to linger around, and things that you want to be kind of explained to you in a lot of detail, and I really appreciate that. It's a very atmospheric book as a result, and it's really, really enjoyable. So the third thing I want to talk about then are the characters. So there are essentially three to four main characters in this book, excluding the villain, because I don't really count the villain as a main character. So there's Elizabeth, Nicholas, and Nicholas's butler, very loose term, Silas. So the thing about magic in this world is that you might think, coming from Margaret Rogerson's other books, and I've heard people saying this, that it's a fae story. It's not a fae story at all. If I had to compare the type of magic that's in this book to any other book out there, it would be City of Bones. It's like connections to, I don't want to say hell because it's not really hell, but it's like the sorcerers require the help of kind of demons and demony magic, but it's not scary demony magic. They're just, I'm calling them demons for like the ease of it, and I think they're called demons in the book. But yeah, it's kind of that sort of magic, which I think is really interesting, because personally I'm a bit tired of fae wish magic, you know. I mean, I read Enchantment of Ravens after this book and I loved an Enchantment of Ravens, but I think this book is better because it takes a much more unique twist on the magic system, especially with the grimoires and everything. It's kind of like, you know, the forbidden section in Harry Potter in like the movie when the book like screams at Harry when he takes it off the shelf. It's kind of like that, but not as scary, obviously. Well, in some places it is pretty scary. So the three main characters kind of basically end up forming into a kind of squad, which I really appreciate. Elizabeth is probably my favorite character. She's kind of this, I don't want to say plucky, but she's plucky, kind of young girl. She kind of comes from a background in which she's been taught that sorcerers are evil and that magic is evil, even though she's around the grimoires, which are products of magic. It's a very kind of complex relationship that she has with it, because on the one hand she wants to be a warder, and warders hate magic and sorcery, and they're protecting the world from the grimoires, so I don't really get the sense that they love the library. It's more like they protect people from the library and also protect the library. So she's kind of got that side, but also she loves the grimoire. She's grown up around them. They're kind of like her family as well. You know, all the books, she knows all the books. She kind of has relationships with them, and they seem to like be closer to her than they are to most other people. So she has this really complicated relationship with magic, and this kind of translates into a relationship with Nicholas in the book, because like he's a sorcerer, and obviously she's been brought up to hate sorcerers, but you know, as they get to know each other, she starts to see that maybe she's had too much of a black and white view of things, especially magic. And I really love how that's explored, and it's not too quick. Like, I hate in books, especially standalones like this, there's a tendency for there to be a sort of insta-love kind of thing going on, where the characters just resolve their differences too quickly and they don't like hold on to any of their misgivings for a believable amount of time. I don't feel like that happens in this book. I feel like Elizabeth and Nicholas work together out of necessity, like for a lot of the book, and they still have their issues and they're still kind of at odds. And if you like that sort of thing where there's like two characters who are sort of forced to work together but they don't really necessarily agree on most things, and there's this sort of witty banter going back and forth, yeah, this book has a lot of that. And as you will know if you've read Enchantment of Ravens, Margaret Rogerson does that really well. She does kind of character dynamics and dialogue really well. So the third character is Silas, who is Nathaniel's butler, and I'm not going to talk too much about Silas because I feel like anything I say about Silas is a spoiler, but just know that it's a really cool character and really fits into it really well, and it's not a love triangle. I feel like I have to say that it's not a love triangle, you know, between him with Nicholas and Elizabeth. It's not, which yeah, I like, especially in a standalone. Whatever about love triangles for trilogies, but in a standalone it's just annoying. You don't have time to feel anything in particular about the characters. Will they, won't they? You know, you kind of just want a straightforward thing. So in conclusion, sort of, I don't really have any qualms about this book. I loved it a lot. I remember I was reading it and I was trying to cook something at the same time, and I burned what I was cooking because I was just sitting there going, this is so great. And it's really great. If you like that sort of thing, magical libraries, I mean, it makes you want to live in that world. And also not, because it's quite dark in places. Yeah, so summing up, I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. Ooh. It's not that there weren't any issues with it. I mean, there weren't issues. There were probably a few things in hindsight now that I'm thinking, oh yeah, that was a bit ordinary or kind of formulaic, but at the same time, while I was reading it, it just dragged me in, like, you know, by my collar and refused to let me go. It's like a mood. The whole book is like a mood. You're in a mood when you're reading the book, and it's a good mood. It's like a, oh my god, this is great mood. Just the language and the characters and the magic and the world and the way it all kind of intermingles, and you know, just the relationships between all the different characters are so good. And it is very much kind of a girl power kind of anthem as well, but not like in an overblown way that makes you go, yeah, I know, yep, girl power. It's like, it's done authentically. You know, I'm not saying I don't like books that you know, are all girl power, but sometimes it's just a bit in your face and it's a bit ham-handed. But this, it was very like, you know, just natural, sort of, yeah, this is a badass woman. And yeah, so I would definitely recommend this book if you like libraries, if you like magic, if you like cool witty banter between the two main characters, if you just like reading really well written prose. I mean, that goes without saying. You obviously don't like reading terrible prose. I certainly don't, but this is kind of, it's a step above most YA in terms of the quality of the writing, and I think this is true of an Enchantment of Ravens as well. If you've read an Enchantment of Ravens, you know that this person is an exceptional writer. They're really very good, and I think this book takes what an Enchantment of Ravens had in terms of raw star quality and matures it and just brings it a step up to be something really special. And that's what I think this book is. I think it's really special. It's gonna stay with me a long time, and I will definitely be rereading it when I'm sad, or you know, when I need a world to be there for me to want to go into. So yeah, thank you for watching. This has been my review of The Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. I'll see you later.